Ladies and gentlemen, if I may just kindly ask you to resume your seats. It's been a very good lunch. It's always difficult to get things going after the lunch break. We'll do the best that we can. So please do take up your seats. Thank you so much. Yes. There we go. Still some people standing up over there. They're Enel people. This is not very good. But I think we can give the go-ahead. Well, yes, well, thank you very much, and welcome back. I hope you enjoyed your lunch. And just a reminder of who will be speaking and talking this afternoon over here on the board, and also a reminder that we're tweeting like never before. So the Twitter hashtag over there is, if you want to contribute, to retweet, to say whatever you want to say, hashtag #InnovateForAfrica. And please feel free, absolutely. Now, this morning we had the pleasure of listening to the new president of RES4MED, and RES4Africa, indeed. But we're all also here thanks to the dedication and devotion of one man. Now, this man has now moved on to very exciting and interesting things, but no matter how hard we tried, we could not keep him outside. He wanted to be with us today. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Francesco Venturini, Enel's new head of Global E-Solutions. And congratulations on your appointment, sir.
Thank you. Does this thing work? That's not true. I was perfectly fine upstairs, but I really needed to do this session because it's a project. It's something that I really want to talk about. It's an experience that we had in Africa, and it's actually an experience that we had trying to, well, let's look at the story first. If this thing works, very, very shortly, I don't know, I mean, I'm pretty sure 90% of the people around here knows that Enel is by value, by capitalization, right now probably the biggest utility in the world. And Enel Green Power is probably the most successful player in the renewable arena in the world. I could keep going about talking about the successes of Enel, but that's not the reason why, obviously, we are here today. Actually, we are here to talk about a failure that we made as Enel Green Power in the past couple of years, a failure that helped us in understanding a little bit more how the African continent works, because we always are very convinced that everything is pretty much the same in a global economy. In reality, local is extremely important. So let's see, all presidents have the same, here we go, kind of problems. So let's start with this slide. The world of energy, probably a lot of you know, is essentially divided in three big groups. So the group number one is the one we live in, a world where the demand is essentially stagnating, where there is an overcapacity in the market, where there is an important transition towards decarbonization, and where it's becoming more important the figure of the prosumer. So we are able now to produce and consume energy at the same time. It's a world where also, thanks to companies like Enel Green Power, the price of energy is going down, and a new wave of electrification is foreseen in the next years. Just to give you an idea, I mean, when we're talking about the wave of electrification, we're talking also about e-mobility, which is something that I will have to deal with in my new job. And the forecast is that by 2040, 50% of the cars that are sold is probably going to be electric. Now, in the world, pretty much 100 million cars are sold every year. So you can just imagine how much energy is going to be needed to move all these cars around the world. But God only knows what the world is going to look like 20 years from now anyway. So it's just a forecast as any other forecast. The only thing I'm saying is a world where a lot of disruption is happening, and is definitely different from the second class of consumers. These are countries that are developing very fast. that they need a lot of energy, and the mix is definitely going to be more balanced than the one that we see in our economies, which are more mature, and I was saying probably much more disrupted. And then there is a third group, which is 1.2 billion people, which is a lot. These people live completely in the dark. Now, you see the number is 2 billion because while 1.2 billion live completely in the dark, then there is another 800 million people who have very limited access to energy. So in the total number of people having no access or limited access to energy in the world is amazingly big, almost 2 billion people. Now, the 2 billion people I was talking about, so the ones that have absolutely no access to electricity, the ones that live in the dark, are, and it's definitely just a case. It's fate, like they say. It's exactly the same number of inhabitants of this planet when Thomas Edison in 1878, if I'm not mistaken, invented the bulbs the way we know them. So in 100 and almost 50 years, substantially we have on the planet, in different places at this point, the same amount of people who have no access to electricity. Now, Enel is, as we said, a very rich and big company, and we have the luxury of coming to work not just for the salary at the end of the month, but also because we believe that we can really change the world. I'm not just saying it because I'm here. I'm saying it because a lot of people working in this company really believe it. And we've been believing it more and more in the past 3 years, riding the wave that our CEO, Mr. Sarace, you met this morning, substantially created, pushing Enel to be more and more relevant on the power scenario around the world. Now, because of this, we decided that we wanted to start a different project. We said, okay, there is 2 billion people with limited access to energy. Let's try to see what we can do to change this. Because again, we come to the office to change the world. So let's engage and let's try doing it. And the first thing that we did was, well, we have the RES4MED. We are very close to the African continent. We are very successful, by the way, in the African continent already with Enel Green Power. Let's cross the Mediterranean Sea and let's see what can really be done. And we looked at our different other sectors in Africa that have done extremely well. They've been extremely successful. Like, for example, telecom. In Africa, as you probably know, there has been a technology leap. Completely, a generation was skipped, and from not having communications or very limited communication, now 75% of the sub-Saharan population has a cellular phone. Now, it's an astonishing number. And if you think about it, it's also extremely important because in many, many situations, it's a matter of survival. If you have a phone, you can work, you can move around, you can contact with other people. If you don't have it, I mean, you're obviously in a very big situation of disadvantage compared to the rest of the population. So technology was extremely important there. I don't know how many of you know, but the mobile banking has been invented in Africa almost 20 years ago. Has been invented actually in Kenya, where there was a problem of moving money around. And the reason why there was a problem, because again, there was the telecommunication was weak. The money to carry money around was dangerous. Banks are not all over the place. Actually, it's very difficult to get to a bank. So there was a problem of exchanging money, especially in Kenya at the time, and using a simple telephone and exchanging text messages from one phone to the other one with a very extensive network of agents in the territory, mobile banking was created. And if you think about it, another piece of mobile banking was created in South Africa pretty much at the same time when a man that right now is running a another fantastic company, which is Tesla in the United States, invented another system to exchange money among probably a different class of population, which is PayPal. PayPal was invented at the end of last century, around 1990, 1999, by Elon Musk in South Africa. So two examples of how technology advance can be Africa, and two great examples for us who wanted to sell what we believe was a basic need like energy. So convinced that technology was the solution for everything, we went down and we started experimenting. Now, technology works in Africa, it doesn't work here. Okay. When we started this project, we were substantially convinced of two things. Number one, energy is obviously needed to carry on your business, to study at home. It's something that gives you light, so it takes you out of darkness. Energy also means social development, means economic development, so it means progress in many ways. And we had all the viable technology available in the market. I mean, we are Enel, so one of the most important tech companies in the energy sector. So we went out and we convinced that technology was the solution. We started building small mini-grids because we were convinced that, and we're still convinced, by the way, that was the solution to all the problems. We even had a fantastic smart meter. When you're talking about Enel, you always need to have a smart meter. Otherwise, you're not really Enel 100%. And with that smart meter, we could invoice the final customer because we were convinced that we could solve, again, all the energy problems in the continent. Well, unfortunately, it didn't go that way. I mean, the experiments showed us that technology maybe was not exactly the solution. So we started to analyze what the problem was and why once we were giving electricity to power to these populations, these people, there was not exactly what we were expecting. So people flocking from all over the country, coming to see the lights up or business starting at a super duper fast pace. And the first thing that we realized was, in Africa, the density of the population is not exactly high when you're talking about rural areas. It becomes extremely high when you're talking about big cities. But out there, the density is not high. And if it's not high, that means also that you need a lot of wires, if you have a mini-grid, to go from the generation equipment up to the homes or offices or shops of the people over there, which meant that the old system was extremely expensive. The second thing that we realized was that we are talking about rural people, so essentially people who woke up in the morning and then went to work because they were mostly farmers. And coming back home, they were essentially tired and they were ready to go and rest. So power was important, but was not exactly important the way we foresaw. The third thing, which is a derivative of this one, very simply put, is when we went there and we tried to find out what was happening, we were asking why electricity wasn't exactly creating all the fantastic things that we were believing they should have created. We were talking to the people and they were saying, look, I mean, that's a great thing, but I mean, at the end, you're giving me this power, this electricity, but what am I supposed to do with it? And it seems like, a silly answer. I mean, it's something that we should have realized before, but that was exactly what was happening. The technology wasn't exactly generating innovation. Energy wasn't exactly generating social and economic progress. So we went back and we tried to figure out once again what was happening. So we went to different villages, we started to talk to people, and by the way, we are a utility, we are not used to, it's a shame to say it, but we are not so used to talk to people in general, because it's a service that people need, so we provide it. It's very difficult for a utility then to understand really the customers that we have in front of us. For once, we decided to go down there. So a nice team of young developers went and started to talk to people in the village. And we have a long list of stories that they told us. But I mean, I want to just point out one. And we were talking to this lady. She was by herself. Her husband left her, and left her with 2 children. And she was there by herself, and she needed to find a job. So using a cell phone, she started to trade dry fish from different villages, and she started to create her own business. And at a certain point, she made enough money to buy power. How did she buy it? She bought 2 solar lamps. One solar lamp, she put it inside her house for domestic use. And the second lamp was put outside, because one priority for her was security. And light is also security. So what we understood, talking to the people and understanding this story, is that number one, solar lamps are very often more than enough for the energy use that is done right now in most of these rural areas in South Africa. And that's because solar lamps are able to provide light for the inside of the house, and at the same time to recharge the phone that, as we said, is an extremely important tool, is a survival tool very often in these areas. The second thing that we learn is that light is safety. Light is important inside the house, but most of the times is even more important outside of the house. The third thing that we learned is that energy doesn't mean social development, and that technology doesn't mean innovation. Substantially, what we realized is that if you don't push in other ways the social economic development of this population, energy is never going to change the world. And we started to engage in a completely different kind of project. We decided that technology was important, but it's not key. And instead, there are completely different factors that are extremely important to make this project successful, and especially to provide the right dose of power to these kind of populations. And these are the 3 main lessons that we learned. The first one is that without a dedicated policy and regulation, this business will never be successful. And the reason why is because at the end it needs a lot of capital and a lot of investments. So you, as probably I do, believe in philanthropy, but philanthropy can go up to a certain level. If you really want to give power to those 1.2 billion people with no access to electricity, and by the way, 600 million live in the African continent, we need to have some policy, some regulation that provides enough support for external investors like us to go and make investments that even if in the long run are going to give some return. The second thing is populations, the density of the population is extremely important. So to try to solve the problem of all the 600 million people in Africa in one shot is going to be extremely difficult for obvious reasons, but we need to focus especially on the areas where the population density is higher. And the third thing, which I believe is the most important of them all, is that we need to find ways of generating wealth, which is not directly coming from providing energy. We need to, at the same time, work on the socio-economic environment that there is in rural Africa. Otherwise, energy by itself is not going to change the world. We're working hard on this. We really believe that with all the lessons learned, we are moving forward. that the problem sooner or later will be solved, and that the world that looked like this at the beginning is probably going to look like this in the next 20 years. Thank you.
Torini. And of course, as you've set yourself on a mission to change and improve the world, I'm afraid there's no way we can let you go. You'll have to come back and be a speaker at every single RES4MED event ever.
I'm happy to do this because we will see the progress that RES4MED is going to make in winning this bet, definitely.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. And without further ado, I would like to be joined here on stage by Professor Vijay Modi, Professor in the Department of Mechanical Engineering at Columbia University. Professor Modi, there we go. And as promised,
thank you.
It's all for you.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Professor.
You can hear me?
Absolutely.
Okay, so beautiful place. Thank you for NL to invite me. My slides are not going to be as beautiful though, and so that's the limitation of academia. Okay, so so can innovation be an enabler, right? We heard quite well that a lot has changed in the last decade, payment systems, low cost of PV. I think I just wanted to highlight one thing that for the high amount of variable renewables that will be on the grid, flexibility will be a big opportunity. Heard that before. Could be vehicles, could be desalination, could be pumps, could be through power electronics and so on, right? So I think now for energy access, you are already seeing new business models. Okay, so if I can get this, yeah, oops. So we have already seen that the high willingness to pay for the first kilowatt hour has allowed and the solar can become small, pay as you go, creating new business models. So by the way, one of the first kind of things we worked on about 10 years ago, which was for solar lanterns, which is things like this, the battery life was key. And to the charge-discharge control of the battery, the circuits people were using were not temperature sensitive. And if you allow for temperature sensitivity and correct for the voltages for charge-discharge, you could get more life. So, and we shared it with many lantern manufacturers. So I want to give you some example, right? Now, I think the question we are all struggling with is, can off-grid provide grid-like service? So I just want to give an example what I mean by grid-like service. Suppose I am a business. Suppose I am having one machine. Now I buy a solar home system or my own private solar system. But if I start another machine, I have to go buy a bigger system. So the grid has the advantage, I think a very important advantage for business, that you can scale your business without each time investing in new infrastructure. So the business can grow, and by the way, the same is true for home, but very important for business. So I just want to point out that there is this quality of the grid that you can just consume more as you need without having to invest in new infrastructure unless you go to a very big factory and you need to change the whole service, right? So I think, so I tried to understand this about 7 years ago. So I deployed about 16 systems, 8 in Mali, 8 in Uganda. Choice was more dictated by where we had partners, right? And to provide plenty of power, but at a high tariff, to see whether actually the high tariff was forced by the partner because they had to recover the cost, right? So, but we learned a couple of very interesting things, and I want to share that, right? And by the way, when we did basic surveys, the customer always said, hey, we want to use electricity when we want it. We want to pay for when we use it, and that's it. And that's kind of like what we do, but so didn't learn much from that survey, right? So next. So this is a place, for example, in Nigeria. We have worked with a lot of remote sense data and all that, digitizing it. Here is a grid, here where there's no grid. So this is Uganda. When we were there, this was about 120 square kilometer grid projected to come here. So we took some community there. This is Mali. So we deployed these 16 systems. Now, interestingly, in Mali, a coup happened afterwards. The systems are all working, by the way, since 6 years. We didn't see huge growth in consumption. In fact, through the coup, the consumption remained even same or a little bit lower. Now, the key lesson we learned here, that utilities were charging $200 to connect to the grid. The poor don't have $200, but they are totally willing to spread that $200 over 2 or 3 years. And by doing that, we reduce that barrier, right? The first cost barrier. And this is what Mobisol is telling us. This is what others are telling us. So I think the grid people have lessons to learn from this, that after investing $1,000 in bringing the connection, if you ask the poor to pay $200, you are really just losing out a lot of customers. Okay, so now there is probably no innovation in wire. We heard that, it's the same wire. But there is innovation in leveraging community on doing the wiring. If I tried to do that in New York, every 100 meters would cost me thousands of dollars, right? In installation, not in wire cost. Also with 6 amp standards, we were able to save considerably. So utility maybe spends $15, $20 a meter on low voltage wire. Here, safe, good standard wire for 6 amp was $3 a meter, right? So that's an interesting sort of possibility. Now, the other challenge we saw with players who came to us was they were spending too much time in doing assessment of the community, design, very, very specialized. Oh, this community needs this, this needs that. You can't run a business like that, right? It has to be modular. It has to be fast. This grid, mini grid, was deployed in 2 days. And we learned a lot from IKEA. They don't send you the furniture already made. You get the people to make the furniture for you, right? Even it comes with all the tools, everything. Now, the key again was managing well the batteries. So that was the key, right? And I think 6 years down the road, the Mali and Uganda systems, the batteries are still working. Payment systems have evolved. We had to use Wi-Fi and a local network created because there was no M-Pesa there, but that's all changing. But what was the lesson we learned in Uganda that was, to me, the most powerful lesson? That over 3 or 4 years, the consumption growth was tremendous. Even as the tariffs were high. But the lesson was, as people paid off their initial cost, they started to consume more. Of course, our experiments, because we reached some system capacity level at some point, right? Now, and the payments went from $250 a month per household to $9. What we learned, probably the single biggest thing, that the poor are credit worthy. The problem is the utilities are frequently not. So the person providing it is not credit worthy, but the actual poor is. So that we are leveraging the fact that you can directly go to the credit worthy person and bypass the non-credit worthy entity. Now, this is not true of every utility. There are very successful utilities, and I see our minister from Ethiopia here. So, this is not true every country, right? So, okay, now, what did we learn? Everybody's consumption did not go up. Residential customers, their consumption only went up by a factor of 2, maybe 3. But some 10% of the customers really became much higher. And those 10% were the ones that were now consuming a lot more. So the $9 average, maybe one can think of as more like $5 or $6 plus a very small percentage consuming a lot more, right? And by the way, that was through things like this, ice making, tailors, small appliances, small refrigerators, and bars, in Uganda, like everywhere else, men like to go and drink, and so don't expect everything to be productive. Okay, so then when the capacity was limited, I think I like the incremental aspect. We need to be incremental and modular. We cannot make big investment on day one. And that allows us to be dynamic, so that as demand grows, you invest more. Now, that's not just true of a mini-grid. That's true of off-grid. That's true of grid. That's just a broad lesson that try to grow with. And that way, you can identify where to invest more first rather than make the investment everywhere. Now we are working quite a bit on dynamic allocation of power and energy limit, but it has to fit on a cheap, robust controller, so that if there is shortage 10 days in a year, you don't have to cut off power to portion of the population. You can just reduce it by a certain amount, and it has to happen very robustly in a way that the consumer likes. So we are working on models for that, some analysis. I won't go into that. Come back to now, so far was household. Now I want to talk about a little bit more than household. By the way, I like this photo because this is what I grew up with in India, even though this photo is from Nigeria, right? So this person is carrying a power plant, the appliance, the fuel, everything on his head. It's portable. I don't think we have come up with a substitute for that yet. So I just want to point out that we have some stuff because the guy does not want to leave it in the farm. He wants to bring it back. He's able to bring it back. Okay. Now, we were seeing some challenges to irrigation, and I think what I realized that over the years, what I'm learning is how to detect opportunity for doing implementation of certain things. What are the signs and signals to look for to go to the place? It's sort of like the approach of creating an industrial park or something. It's like, hey, you need to a country has limited resources. It needs to focus on a certain area to get the most bang for the buck. How do we identify? So we identified onion farmers, carrot farmers. This was in Senegal, right? Now, again, same issues, So we realized that the key for small farmers was high utilization for it to be cost effective. Okay, this is the key. If you have sun is shining, you don't use it, it's gone. That's one. Secondly, to keep the cost low, forget batteries, right? That brings the cost down dramatically. So this is a batteryless system, okay? It's the cooperative that buys it, operates it, charges farmer, actually to avoid the regulatory issues, they charge by the water, but it really works out to 50 cents a kilowatt hour, okay? But, that if they charge by that, they have to get all sorts of permissions, right? So, and then we use low-cost AC pumps. The DC pumps were very expensive. That could change over time. Now, the farmers were very judicious. They used drip and all that. So how do you identify these opportunities, right? So my point is, when you do this, you need transport, you need market, you need finance, right? So all of this has to work together. And I think the point was made just earlier, the same thing, right? And I think every photo has people in it, right? So it's important that the entity that is going to scale it understands that, right? And so PRODAC, an agency in Senegal, is going to take this up. Let's see how it works, okay? The innovation here was to keep the cost very low through using variable frequency drives and through the use of scheduling. And scheduling is simply that the pumps come on as the sun goes up. So the farmer comes in the morning, pays for water, then the system schedules that you'll get water for 2 hours, 1 hour. And all this is standard hardware. This is the only really, I would say, innovation in logic, in control, and in payment systems. The remaining stuff is basically identifying good but not excellent quality product that is at a very good price point. If I try to buy this inverter, 25 kilowatt in Europe, it will cost me thousands of dollars. Okay? We bought several ones, tested. We are doing it for $400. Okay? So that's where the innovation is in pricing. Now here, unlike the other application, the growth was fabulous and fast and quick in the uptake because it was directly going into income, revenue was coming back. Okay? A lot of role for government. Okay, so my time is going. I'm going to skip this. I think payment systems are going to change. India is doing a revolution in that. Okay, so we provide for the small entities in Africa, to test power electronics. We provide testing for motors, right, and loads. We provide we can test a variety of different configurations in the lab easily and quickly, right? What I think I want to leave with is we are doing something where we are putting all the complexity into a small box, okay? Payment system. Now this thing can read wireless meters from a kilometer radius, and then it can do logic, billing, all that in one box. And there's some installations of that in Uganda for field testing. Of course, capacity building is going to be key, training in digital systems. I want to leave with this, that we did something in Rwanda, which was very interesting. It's the same idea as pay-as-you-go, but for materials, right? There's a lot of demand in villages for furniture, for doors, for windows, all this, right? And we provided a pay-as-you-go system for materials. So the material is brought in one shot, but the individuals can pick up one of these at any time. So they don't have to pay for the high logistics cost. So this is like a mini industrial park. You got electricity, you got materials, you got tools, but this guy may be running a different business from the next guy. Over 3 years, we are seeing all sorts of activities emerge around there. We needed a space, electricity, and materials. And so that's another sort of application. Okay, we are working with water now. That's becoming a big need to kind of digitize water, how to cheaply do that. We are doing that now to just find the extra $20 that would make it digital. And let's see, maybe that's the last slide. Okay, that's the last slide. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Modi.
Yeah.
Professor Vijay Modi from Columbia University, thank you very much for your time, sir. And it gives me pleasure now to call up an old friend of Enel's, certainly, and hope an old friend of mine. It's Jesper Holmberg of GiveWatts. Jesper, it's good to see you again.
Thank you.
Will we in need of this?
Great one. Yes.
Wonderful.
The green one.
Yes.
Good. No, everyone's complained about it, so I needed to make sure. It's a pleasure to be back and to be hosted by RES4Africa and Enel Foundation and to see all of you guys. A lot of the points that I'm going to make have been made already, and Torini totally killed it, and Professor here filled in the gaps. But I'm going to make it anyway, and I apologize for my notes because I made some quick scribbles on stuff that I would like to highlight. Where do I point it? There we go. So I moved to Kenya in 2010, and I worked with various investment vehicles as a consultant in various projects. I have a background in development, and I've also been an entrepreneur previous to that in the UK during the dot-com boom. and I wanted to change my life. So I moved to Kenya. I needed challenges. I needed something exciting to do. My first education was psychology. I was going to be a therapist. It's probably good for a lot of patients that I'm not. I'm way too curious, which I think will show in the presentation. So GiveWhat's 2010, we founded it. We tried different models, and talking about failure, wow, we failed so much. The 30,000 households that we've reached now, most of them are the past 2 years. So in the beginning, we were belly scraping every time we tried something new. We did mini-grids, small mini-grids, we did school installations, and after a while, we ended up with our own distribution system, our own distributors in the field. We tried agents, we tried shops, everything failed. We even tried PayGo, but for the target market we were going for, it didn't really work. So now we've found our model. We think that education is hard currency. It's hard currency because it helps you think. It's an important thing if you want to have a successful life. It helps you make choices. It helps you educate yourself further. And you can't have development if you don't have the agents actually making the change happen. So here you see what and how. And I'm coming to the why. Why are we doing it? I agree with the presentation before that you have a golden circle and you need to address the why. I'll highlight one number on this slide, which is the 5.6 million hours saved. I'll come back to that point, but let me highlight it already now. In Africa, in Kenya, it's a fact that women will spend 4 hours per day collecting firewood. 4 hours per day. I don't know what your commute is like, but mine certainly isn't 4 hours. 4 hours of valuable time, daylight, and you only have 12 hours of those per day in Kenya, where you could do other things. Maybe find a job, maybe do something else that improves your household situation. That's a need we need to address. The income pyramid, as we know it, is a pyramid. It looks like a pyramid. It's not really true, though. If you take the African context, it looks more like a coat hanger. And really, the hanger part should be flatter than what it is here. We don't have a distribution of wealth in Africa. We really don't. We saw that on the slide previous, where wealth in Africa is minute. And whatever money is there is usually shipped somewhere else. If you take in Kenya, and these numbers are fairly up to date, I usually use 40% of the population living in extreme poverty, and when I looked it up just for this presentation, it's between 42 and 50% living on less than $2 a day. Now, how do you live? Well, you live in the countryside, maybe you have a cow, maybe you have some land and so on. So there's a drought in East Africa right now, which means that there is no yield, the cows are dead. If you go up to Marsabit, north of Kenya, you'll find heaps of flesh and skin. Actually, not so much flesh, but skin and bones. So they have nothing left. There's also a bit of a political situation with the maize. So there is no maize, and ugali is what people eat at least twice a day. The spike, the obelisk, as I call it sometimes, that's 0.5% of the population. They live in wealth. And then you have 1 to 2%. They live on between 30 and 300 bucks a day. It's not more than that. And those people usually live in Nairobi or Mombasa or Kisumu. And most of their money they don't keep so much in Kenya. And then you have a big segment that make between 2 and 30 bucks a day. And then you have 42 to 50%, depending on who you trust. Now, another important aspect to that is that 70% of the people in Kenya live in the countryside. Urbanization is only at 30%. Which means if you live in the countryside, you are almost guaranteed not to have that much money. Now, how do you define countryside and urban population in a place like Kenya? It's hard. So if you go to Kisii, it's a very densely populated area. It's still rural, though. If you go to Kisii town, obviously that's a town. Not massive, though. So at the bottom of the pyramid, you'll find a household like this. There is the road you see behind is the road that leads to them. There are a couple of other houses in the area where they live. We'll see a picture from inside this household in just a minute. You'll see the firewood, which is what they use not just to cook, but also for light. You see a dog, which keeps the goats in check, and then they also have cows. How do you sell something to someone like that? It's hard, but we do it. We use the concept of the energy ladder. It's pretty worn, but I find it very useful anyway. You'll see that at the bottom you have biomass and fossil fuels. That means you have 3 rocks to cook, and you might have a kerosene lantern, like the one on the picture, or very often you use a twig just for light. 70% of the population in Kenya use firewood for cooking, 70%. 24% use charcoal, also a pretty bad fuel, and the balance will use LPG gas. So when we're talking about markets and so on, we're talking about scaling up supply of this. It's hard to sort of, you need to make the link. You need to be relevant to the household. If you're not relevant to the household, they will not be your customer. I'm going to highlight one more thing on this, and that is this circle. And I call that the gender trap. I mentioned before that a Kenyan woman will spend on average 4 hours a day collecting firewood. So that's a time trap. You also see that the phone and the solar lamp there are highlighted. And that is, despite the amazing innovation around M-Pesa and other mobile money platforms, the husband usually has the phone and is a gatekeeper. And this has been a challenge that's highlighted by various schemes where you do cash transfers. Google has done one. Various donors are doing similar ones in Kenya right now. And unless they can guarantee that the money goes to the woman, they won't do it anymore. Because what happens otherwise is that the man will get the cash, and then he will go to where Professor was mentioning before, the bar, and the money will go away. So if you want to address these needs, where do you start? Well, I don't know, but I studied psychology, so I went back to my first book in psychology, and I found this. If you place the income pyramid, and then you look at all the different things and the hierarchy they come in, and I added extreme poverty at the bottom, because if you're extremely poor, you don't really think about the other things. The big mass of people are where you have the physiological need. Food. If you go to bed hungry 5 to 7 times a week, you won't think about the lamp. You won't think about the stove necessarily. You'll think about what you want to eat. You need time for recovery. If you spend 4 hours a day collecting firewood, 4 hours times 7, you do the maths. You need time to recover from that physical exercise. You're carrying a heavy load on your head by foot. You carry it back home, and you need to survive. You will be hungry. You might have 1 meal a day. Now, I'm talking about, because of the income pyramid, and I didn't do it flat enough because I'm not that good with PowerPoints, but the point is that we're talking about 70 to 80% of the population, especially now when there's a drought, where you have food insecurity and that level of vulnerability in the communities. Another pyramid I could add to this is that the demographics will look like this too. So everyone's young, almost. It's 70% are below the age of 15, which is crazy. So what will they do? Now, if you take the energy ladder and the pyramid then, where do these different things come in? Well, you see at the bottom you have, and this is by no means exact, but you have 3 rocks and no light. That is the bottom of the pyramid. You do biomass, maybe a solar light, maybe mobile charging. That is when you hit above $2 a day. You can't sell anything to someone who is on less than $2 a day. Above that, you start having solar systems, improved biomass, maybe LPG. There are some experiments on that. You start seeing other appliances like small TVs, radios, maybe even a mobile phone. And you start seeing B2C, which was something that has been highlighted a couple of times here. You start seeing that you can actually do something that doesn't only save you money, in best case, but it also makes you more productive. And then above that, you have proper power tools. We've seen examples of that too, but it comes much further up in the income pyramid. And above that, you have European consumption. I installed a solar water system last week in my house in Kenya. It cost me $4,000. I mean, there's no way you can afford that if you're lower down. And with poor access to credit, etc., it makes it difficult. Now, above that, you have Tesla and air conditioning on your private jet. And that exists. Now, if you then compare it to, and you take that one step further and you look at the market composition, at the bottom of the pyramid, we've tried working in Dadaab and Kakuma, the 2 refugee camps in Kenya, and northern Uganda as well, actually, the post-conflict area there. It's very hard. It's very NGO dominated. And that's not only because no one can afford something, it's also that because of the NGOs having been there for such a long time, it's a market that doesn't really function. Because they know that if someone comes in a big white Jeep, and especially if they have a ponytail, you won't have to pay anything. Above that, you have NGOs, a few private players. They come and go, and you work with distributed energy. So if you have the question, it was a good one before. If the question is, will we see grid expand? I would just say, just look at the mobile telephone industry. Would we ever expect there to be landlines in Africa? So in the same sort of, with that concept, I think we will see a combination, but I'm pretty sure that distributed energy will be the king. And distribution of that, it was a very good example before. You need to build the grid of distribution so that you can get this stuff out there. And then maybe at some point you will have grid, but grid can feed off industry. It can't really feed off household consumption. I know that KPLC is speaking a bit later, but I know that last year they added a lot of households, and the impact on the base load was minimal. And that's probably because people just turn on a light. They don't have access to those other appliances that will consume energy to the same extent that I'm used to: a microwave, a water boiler, an oven, and so on. Now, above that, you find NGOs are still active in this whole space. It's a bit of a mess, actually. It's very much distributed energy. There are a few pagos there. Gigawatts is there as well. And then above that, you hit where the paygo really have the mother load. Where you also find grids sometimes, you find mini-grids and microgrids. And to the point made earlier, mini-grids and microgrids, I'm not really sure what the definition is and what the difference is there, but they are really good on paper, but it's very difficult to get customers to sign up and start using properly. So you need to work with that. Coming to my main point around that in a bit. And then above that, you don't really care because you have your Tesla already. There's actually a Tesla in Nairobi, which is a bit odd. Coming back to the why. The why we're doing this is to create an opportunity to climb. We don't like people being poor. It really bugs me, big time. But I can't give them stuff. I need to create an environment where they can grow and thrive, and I can't do it on my own, which is why it's an honor to be here with you guys, driven by the same things, so that we can help these masses of people climb this ladder and start using a little bit better, and then a little bit better, and then at some point they will hit where they can have a grid equivalent or a grid experience. A point made earlier is that we're talking about this pyramid. The base will only expand if nothing happens, because we're now at 1 billion people in Africa. It's going to be 2 billion in not too distant future. So what do you do with 2 billion people, out of which 1.6 are probably below 15 years old? Tough. And then you see the connection between a ladder, the energy ladder, and food security and financial inclusion. You need the holistic approach to this. So this is one of our users. I took this picture myself. It's not as nice as the pictures we've seen otherwise, but to me this has great meaning. We'd been out probably 4 hours from the tarmac towards Masai Mara. I don't know if you know Kenya that well, but it's really far out. It's beautiful. The outside of the house was the picture initially. And once we had done everything and we did a follow-up and we interviewed and we sort of like had some tea, it was a bit scary to drink the tea, but I did. And one of my guys came, "Jesper, you have to see this." So I went inside and I saw this girl sitting there with crayons. Now I have 2 kids, one is 11 and one is 14. At the time I took this, I think this girl was around 9 and one of my kids was around 9. So that's what you do. I'm not saying that that's increasing productivity, but it does something in the head, which is very positive, and that's the change you need to make. Innovation has to be relevant. It's not so much technology, I don't think. I think it's much more how you do it, and your approach into the big kind of arena where energy fits. I love energy, But energy is not sexy. Energy is not exciting. It's what you do with energy that's exciting. And you need to create those steps to help them climb. Typical kind of someone studying using a lamp, but that's pretty big. There's a story behind this girl. This is a Sun King lamp, old version. It's 100 lumens, so it's not sexy at all when it comes to a grid experience, but you can see that it gives pretty good light for this kid. That kid improved her grades vastly. I can't actually remember if it was 20 or 30% in 3 months, but along those lines, just by having access to study time. So you just need to increase the study time a little bit. Conscious of time. So I leave you with that. It's about creating an opportunity to climb. This picture is not from the same place where that initial house was, but it's a similar area. And that's where a lot of people live. So that's the people we need to reach. That's the people we need to empower, to think for themselves, to take their own decisions, and to become more productive and happier as such. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Jasper.
So I almost
Thank you so
walked
much.
off with it.
Insightful as always. Thank you. And looking forward to having you here many times.
Thank you.
And I'm calling up on our next speaker now from advisory partner from PwC, Ms. Angeli Hoekstra. And I do apologize about the pronunciation. I even asked. I'm sure I got it wrong. Would you need this?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, if we talk about innovation, we first need to understand actually what are the problems that we want to get solved. And that is what I want to highlight first before talking about how can we solve them actually with innovation. So the problems that we have in Africa is there's very low electrification levels, but specifically in the rural areas. In the cities it's okay, but in the rural areas it's about 12.9% electrification levels. Furthermore, in other parts of Africa, we see it in East Africa, actually there's a whole lot of installed capacity, but it's not delivered to those rural areas. So the capacity is actually there. But in other parts of Africa, we have installed capacity, but the capacity is actually not working for us. We can see it in Nigeria, we can see it in Zimbabwe, and there's different reasons why that capacity is actually not working for us. One of them is access to fuels. Another one is there's old systems, there's lots of outages with these old systems. We have tremendous capital project delays in building the new extensions on the grid. Not everywhere and not all companies have this. We have a lot of illegal connections which result in safety problems, but also it results in outages again. And we have insufficient funding. So if we look at these type of problems, then we can look at innovation and see how actually innovation can solve these problems. And I believe we are in a perfect storm right now that we can make a real difference to Africa with the innovation that's going on in the world right now. And there's two we can see innovation in two different ways. We can see innovation from a digital perspective, and we can see innovation from a technology perspective. From a digital perspective, we're now dealing with the industrial Internet of Things. We're dealing with robotics, we're dealing with drones, augmented reality. And those type of things can make a real difference in Africa too. With those, we can integrate the supply chain. We can, by installing sensors, we can make sure that we produce things and we do maintenance in where it's needed. We can identify when there will be downtime and where it will be. We can make sure that parts will be ordered when they are necessary to be ordered. We have seen tremendous improvements in just that looking at how do we do stock management in a plant. And if we can use innovative ways for that, which the industrial Internet of Things and robotics and drones support, we can make a big difference in making the plant more efficient. If we just think about augmented reality, for example, we have like a huge education gap in Africa too, on the engineering side too. If we just look at some examples from Boeing, for example, that's they built like a wing of an airplane. They built it 30% faster and 90% more accurate, just by using augmented reality, by having like something on a tablet as well that outlines what to do and when to do and how it looks like. Also DHL, for example, they increase like the efficiency by order picking 25% by having like special glasses on. So those are like things that you can use also in Africa. You know, to improve like maintenance and operation, the capital projects, efficiency, and it. So if we look at big data and analytics, and that is another like thing that's playing in the digital world, artificial intelligence and machine learning. Only if we have access, you know, to the internet, we can have access to cloud, to PaaS and SaaS services. Therefore, we can do computations that never were possible before. If we can do those computations, we can predict weather patterns, we can predict maintenance problems, we can predict when we need to do replacements. If we then move to the small home system space, there, like innovation plays a tremendous role as well, and which we have seen in previous presentations too. You know, because like the people in Africa that are in the poor rural community areas, 20% of the income actually goes to paying for kerosene. So if you can reduce like the spending on the kerosene by providing them with small home solar systems, you can provide them with a better life. And like especially like in the presentation before that we saw these really beautiful pictures with that girl learning better. And the cost of solar is still like dropping. It's dropping very fast, 16% year on year over the last 5 years. And the other thing that we need to take in consideration in Africa as well, only like 30% of the rural areas can actually be grid connected in a feasible way. So we need to do it in a different way. And that's why we need these new technologies. If we look at the microgrids and the distributed generation, what is very important to make microgrids work is to have an anchor client. And we can see the lessons learned from Enel in that area as well. So we need to have an anchor client to make the microgrids work. We still have like a lot of like price reductions in solar and in winds, and it will go on together with like a reduction in battery storage. So according to the World Energy Council, battery storage costs will be reduced by 70% by 2030. So then batteries become more feasible as well, and therefore also like distributed generation, but also off-grid distributed generation and feeding it back into the grid. On the energy storage side itself, there's also like more and more new technologies that play on the energy storage. Like we have lithium batteries, we have flywheels, we have air compression. So with those type of new technologies, and if the price is reduced on those technologies, we can make it more feasible in Africa too. A very important part of like increasing electrification levels and electricity supply in Africa is mobile banking. And we heard it already in a couple of the presentations before as well. Revenue collection is still a major problem. Expect maybe in the small home solar system space, but mobile technology is like really key. And luckily Africa leapfrogged from a mobile technology perspective compared to the rest of the world. And then we have all the things going on from a technology side behind the meter. So behind the meter, there we see like a lot of increase in energy efficient appliances. Right now you can have like a TV on 30 watts. It's not that long ago we had like a light bulb on 60 watts. So like the improvement in those type of like energy efficient appliances and what you can do in homes with heat pumps, and clever thermostats, etc., can make a huge difference as well. But what is really key in Africa that we need to take into consideration is the key enablers to make this all work, to make digital and to make new engineering techniques work in Africa. That is, we need to have access to the internet. And luckily in Africa, due to the mobile spread, most places have access to internet. The bandwidth can still be improved. That is the biggest problem. Further, we need to have like an enabling policy. And what do I mean with an enabling policy? We need to look at it from a top-down and from a bottom-up perspective. We need to go beyond just like thinking about expanding transmission lines and getting people connected. We need to do it from a bottom-up perspective as well in the rural areas. We need to look at mini-grids. But if we look at mini-grids or small home solar systems, we need to understand when the grid actually reaches those areas. So we need to have like some planning around it. And we also need to have protocols in place. So if specific areas are reached by the grid, what is the scenario then when we do have a mini-grid in place already there in those areas? And we can look at, for example, at off-grid funds to make specific things happen in specific areas. The other thing that you need to take into consideration from like a country perspective is put specific incentives in place. And it's not necessarily that you need to put subsidies in place, but more maybe just from like, for example, a tax perspective. Or that you like support specific education for innovative technologies. You know, incentives around those type of areas are very, very important. And then the last thing, which is a key enabler, is inclusive finance. And there I also see like that there can be some coordination between the different donors as well. Like there's donors busy with, you know, looking at inclusive finance options, and others are busy with how do we electrify Africa. If those come together, we can create like a real leapfrog into the future. So to summarize, in order to leapfrog to a sustainable electricity access and supply solution in Africa, we need to look at innovations in technology, and we need to look at digital, and we need to embrace the two. And the focus needs to shift from just thinking about transmission extensions and big generation to more distributed and off-grid projects. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hoekstra. Thank you very much indeed. It's a pleasure to have you here. Ladies and gentlemen, we can move on to a presentation on Ethiopian Industrial Parks project. And it is a pleasure and, of course, our honor to be able to host here today from Ethiopia the State Minister for Industry, His Excellency Dr. Mebrahtu Meles. Your Excellency, thank you so much. And should we be needing...
Okay with this?
Thank you.
Sound system. Buonasera. Grazie per avermi invitato a questo evento. I'm very much honored to be here among such great speakers, also participants. Also very happy to see this thematic area on this 5th annual conference, the innovation as the key enabler to power Africa. And thank the organizer, especially RES4MED and INEL, for selecting such a very relevant topic for Africa. In fact, top on the agenda. So very happy again to be here. I'm here in Europe to promote my country, but on this side event I'm invited here. So yes, energy is an enabler, but energy alone cannot change anything, So I will talk how energy should be linked also with other enablers, to make Africa to come out of poverty, So I have a very big presentation, but I will be in a very quick way to draw your attention to some of the relevant area to the topic selected. So I recognize all participants here. I think this is a private-public dialogue forum, a very important forum. And there are many heads of institutions here from industry, from academia, and from different institutions. So really, it's a big honor for me again. So before I go into the details, let me talk a little bit about my country, Ethiopia, in the east part of Africa. We are having national milestones to become a middle-income status by 2025. Not only that, we want to be also a leading nation in light manufacturing. When we say light manufacturing, again, we mean industries that use agricultural raw material, labor-intensive industries, less relatively in capital and technology. For that, again, we have, all these targets, It's about industrialization, of course, structural transformation from agriculture toward industry. So a little bit about the geography. It's part of Africa. A lot has been said about the sister country, Kenya. Happy to hear also about this initiative in Kenya. And as you see, Kenya is the south part of Ethiopia. And some factors, very big country, 1.1 million square meters. But what is interesting, 45% of the area is suitable for agriculture. That is very much arable land. And we have also a big, about 10 million hectare irrigable land, and 18 major agroecological zones, because the country is finding itself from as low as minus 200 meters below sea level and going up into 4,500 meters, above sea level. So you can imagine you can grow anything in the country, in Ethiopia. Today it's known more than 160 crops can be grown, So that's also a gift from God, blessed by God. So population, the second most populous country after Nigeria. High population growth rate, about 2.5%. And we are now approaching into the 100 million points. 25% Nigeria and Ethiopia accounts for population. Another interesting fact, Ethiopia is located not only in the east part of Africa, gateway for Africa, but also in the center of the planet, You measure, any distance. But again, Ethiopia is also have access to many markets with a lot of preferential agreement. We say we are also connected to the world via the famous Ethiopian Airlines, #1 in Africa, flying to more than 90 destinations and providing also cargo services, for agricultural output. Fundamentals about Ethiopia in the hot spot of East Africa, but very stable and because of these factors. And we have one of the fastest economic growth in the world. If I draw your attention to the IMF, economic outlook, we have been persistently outperformed many economies, including China, in the last decade, as you can see, and this is the case also now. And also investment is peaking in the country, as you can see. On average, we have about 30-35% growth rate of investment. Some of the major players in the country, in every sector almost. Trade economy is booming, but trade deficit is so huge. Again, another opportunity for investment. These are not very much relevant, but let me again bring you to the most relevant. It has been mentioned, Kenya is also a young nation, but also Ethiopia. If you see the population structure in Ethiopia, 70% of the population is below the age of 30. So people are talking about demographic dividend. And so to Ethiopia, 1/3 of the population is now in the education sector, about 28 million. And in fact, we have 40 universities, 40, and now in the pipeline 10 universities. By the end of our plan period, 5-year period, we are reaching one university per 2 million population. So this is another area where we are going to tap comparative advantage. The topic is about energy. Ethiopia has done a great stride in terms of energy, and we have been renewable energy investment, one of the biggest dam in Africa, the Renaissance Dam, this is on Nile River, with 6,250 megawatt, 50% is completed. And of course, today we are generating about 4,200 megawatt, and we have a lot of hydro projects in the pipeline. In fact, companies from Italy like Salini, there for the last 20 years involving, and there are some also in the pipelines on the tender. And in fact, we have renewable energy like wind. Already 3 wind parks are operating, now much more in the pipeline. Solar energy, geothermal energy, but by and large, we are now aggressively going in the hydro energy. In fact, there is also Kuyisha Park, that is with 2,000 Kuyisha hydropower, 2,200 megawatt. I think Salini is also involving in this project. So cheap, green, and energies that we have, clean, of course, clean energy. And you see, you might surprise, current rate is 3 cents per kilowatt hour. You don't find in this planet such kind of cheap energy. So this is another advantage that we have. Of course, another application of energy, you see, is the railway, newly started from Addis to port of Djibouti, 800 kilometers, started already now functioning. Now it's on a testing phase, but it started. We have also other corridors, going on. So a lot of infrastructure. We have also light railway, electric light railway in Addis, 34 kilometers already established. Yeah, our priority sectors are this. In agro, as we mentioned, light, because the country is agrarian country, 80% is zero, are dependent for their livelihood on agriculture. Again, agriculture presents a big potential, So in short, we say Ethiopia is agro power. And to unleash the potential in agriculture, to even transform agriculture itself, we are now, beside other interventions, other infrastructural intervention, now the government has aggressively building, industrial parks in the country. As you can see, we have this public run, industrial parks that are at different stages, but we have also private run parks, or some of them are operational, some of them are on the way. So when we see it, today we have already operational park in the south part. It's for textile and garment, and in different sectors also. In pharmaceutical is also under construction. So almost, we are now undertaking this industrial park development in the whole country, To give you some pictures of, this is operational in the south part, eco-industrial parks. Already is occupied. This is in Addis, already operational. Phase 1, phase 2 is financed by World Bank and underway. There's a Chinese Eastern Industry Park outside of Addis. We have potential again, coffee. Ethiopia has presented this gift because the bird is not only the birthplace of mankind, but also the birthplace of coffee. So you drink every morning when you rise espresso, so you need to thank Ethiopia for that, because coffee is found in Ethiopia. Sesame is also, very huge potential that requires mechanization. Again, I would like to draw your attention here. They are burning, these straws, wasting, a lot of wells. We can think of, recycling all this and using for energy and for other byproducts, Huge, about 400,000 hectares in one part only, suitable for mechanization. There is also a huge river over there. And I'm talking only about one part, but in different parts, we have big agricultural waste that could be recycled. The speakers earlier, they were mentioning about the energy ladder. I have seen from the biomass, so that could be, a great potential also to bring, energy to the rural communities, also to the park, to the corridor. These are potentials. Now I'm going to talk about the agro-industry park. Beside other parks, now we are undertaking the establishment of, there are food parks, but we call them integrated agro-industry parks. Based on the potential, you see the colors, they are representing 17 agro-industry corridors, corridor of 100-kilometer radius. So we have carried out a study. Out of this now, we go for piloting in 4 of the corridors. Based on this, on the left side, this is the criteria. Production potential is a weightage of about 35%, but there are other criteria too. So we have started construction in these corridors. These are industrial park in a rural setting, closer to the agricultural endowment. So you can imagine how innovation could be applicable in this corridor, because we are going to create township. We are going to apply a lot of mechanization, processing industries, linking agriculture with industry. So the whole connectivity, within the corridor could be an experimental field, for different actors, for in fact on a commercial base, So this is I'm going to talk about the business model. Then that business model, how could be, be relevant to the topic that we are discussing now. You'll see it. We have a park from 250 hectare, semi-modular, up to 1,000 hectare, located somewhere in a suitable place. And then this is linked to what we call rural transformation center. There are on average now in the selected pilot one, 7 or 8 rural transformation center with the primary function of primary processing, sorting, grading, pulping, where it requires huge energy also for cooling infrastructure, for other activities as well. So again, we have what we call it aggregation centers. The village, the green, is circles surrounding the rural transformation center. There are aggregation center right at the village level, with the farmers bringing their produce, to deliver, to transact. And there are small towns. There are going to be small towns, again, with infrastructure required. If there are, a lot of perishable goods, even cereals, they need, the basic warehouses with all the cooling infrastructures and so on. So there will be too many of them based on the amount of, production, agricultural production that will be available. Therefore, with this model, you see, with this model, we are not only taking agricultural produce, processed value add into the market, but also in the park, they are going to be located other industries that put input to the agricultural sector. Therefore, the model will ensure what we call it the backward and forward linkage. That means agriculture with industry, lifetime marriage, we call it, So this will transform the whole economy. In fact, this model will apply to the whole Africa, because Africa today is exporting its raw material, and yet Africa is buying food from outside of Africa. Africa cannot feed itself, unfortunately. So, according to the African Development Bank, annually Africa spends about $35 billion to buy food from outside of Africa, despite the whole potential, whole land, arable land, rivers, labor, you name it, market. And this figure will reach by 2025 to $110 billion if anything cannot be taken place or intervention cannot take place. So for that, to feed the people, to come out of poverty, they need to develop agriculture. For agriculture to develop again, you need industry as a pull and push factor. So this model is very important. And you can see wherever from the aggregation center all the way to the industry park, in the whole corridor, how innovation could be a big enabler in this regard. It's not in a scattered village, you can also apply in a scattered village, but if you apply it in a potential area like this, then the people's life could transform, very quickly. And of course, the spillover effect of these potential areas could impact to the whole country, in every part of Africa. So the master plan already made in this regard. So this park looks like this, full-fledged park, eco-industrial park, not only core industries, but also we are going to have, allied industries, specialized infrastructure, and housing, effluent treatment plant, you see, power. So here again, whether it's solar energy for all the buildings that are here, whether it is wind, wherever it applies, also can be applied here, in the park. And of course, looking the whole corridor again, another potential. So in here, we are going to have also research institutions, universities, technical and vocational training centers, and other, service providers, trading, logistics, you name it. So application of innovation in general, and as well as, this renewable energy could be a big. This is the conceptual design view of the Rural Transformation Center. They are going to locate on a 10 hectare, so at a different distance within the corridor. Some features about the detailed feasibility of each park. What are the opportunities? You see a lot of processing opportunities here. Again, in a nutshell, there could be opportunity for agri-inputs to modernize agriculture, including renewable energy over here, as you can see. And we have agri-infrastructure again, then agro-industry, the food processing. Of course, other opportunities as well. There are huge rooms for everyone, starting from the farmers all the way to big industries, multinational. We have a multitude of institutes under our ministry. They are instructed to take, location in the park, to support the industries in every sector. You can see, you don't find nowhere in Africa, country with such kind of institute. We call ourselves developmental state to provide support to the. Another important fact is that Ethiopia has selected as a pilot for the so-called Sustainable Development Goal, this Agenda 2030, eradicating extreme poverty. And in fact, we have done very good in MDG goals. We have achieved the 6 goals out of the 8 goals. But not only that, we managed at a country level to achieve food self-sufficiency. And due to this and other factors, Ethiopia has selected as a pilot for the coming SDG goals. Goal number 9, let me talk about goal number 9. As you can see on the bottom of the slide, building resilient infrastructure, ensuring inclusive and sustainable industrial development, and fostering innovation. There are 3 I's. Industrialization. Why industrialization? Social goals cannot be enough, to bring people out of poverty. It was, mentioned, whole Africa is, most of the population is, poor, below the poverty line. In my country, 23% of our population is below the poverty line. Even though we have done a lot in the last decades, still there is a long way to go to address, the population, to bring out of poverty. Therefore, to achieve this, we need industrialization. Industrialization will bring sustainable income, sustainable employment. That's why, this is one of the top focus. Secondly, infrastructure, like the industrial parks, especially to transform agriculture is very important. That's why the second focus for infrastructure. Innovation, I leave for you, I should not explain, you know. So there are 3 I's there with this goal number 9. Of course, the whole MDG goal, the 17 goals, we'll find everywhere, you know, the application of innovation, including in renewable energy. So these are, you know, the gentlemen that are famous to you. Our Prime Minister to the left, Ban Ki-moon, and the UNIDO Director General. Senegal is another pilot country. Of course, Peru from Latin America is included. So we have been given a top assignment to demonstrate this to the global community and to share this experience with other African countries. So every innovation activities that we have, you are welcome to be on board, to implement here so that we can scale up, you know, to the whole part of Africa. Just where we are, I will again pick some of the relevant. Agriculture is very backward in Africa, very traditional. So we have to modernize it in all means. So we are doing a lot in that regard. Even though there are these potentials, we need mechanization, we need irrigation, we need infrastructure, we need capacity building, and so on. Of course, market is, you know, the most important, and industry is in the sustainable market to bring it to the international, to the global value chain. Community is at the center of our whole discussion. At the end of the day, now we need to transform the people's life, subsistence life, into commercial, into industrialization. So we have a sub-program for this one. Then again, construction of the park is becoming official. Prime Minister is now championing all this. Then the initial setup and capacity building is another program. Here again, for you, an important, you see, we are drawing all actors to the center stage. We call it the epicenter for the transformation press. We map out all the universities and activities in the corridors, in the pilot corridors, to take up a research activity, in fact, to have a branch in the corridors, whether it is in agriculture and in the industry. No? So the cooperation with these universities, including in innovation, renewable energy, can be also considered. The technical and vocational training education also the same. So we have a joint plan already. We have been given as from the demand side to all these actors, human resource, research, technology transfer, need of the industries, the upcoming industries. So they have started working. And I think we can see this is another potential also for cooperation. The government of Ethiopia has decided to organize annually Pan-African event, in fact, global event for agro-investment in Addis. This picture is from last October 5-7. We have the first agro-investment forum, whereby, you know, we have invited 1,200. Then next March 2008, we are inviting all of you to Addis, capital of Africa, where we are targeting, you know, 3,000 participants minimum. In fact, in the last event, we have many companies from Italy leading. But this time we are going in a big event with different format. We can put energy as one event, you know, among the other events, you know, that take place. Business to business, business to government, government to government. Exhibitions and visit to the parks also is also considered. So we can have, you know, I don't know, if not 6 annual conference, we can think of coming from the MEDA countries all the way down to sub-Saharan Africa. So think about it, the organizers. So we are ready now to host all these things. So investment promotion is another important area we need to attract. That's why I'm here in Italy, Belgium, UK, Germany, to attract investors, you know. Of course, when we talk of investors, domestic investors starting from farmers are also equally important. Therefore, we also need a lot of investment in the corridor. Resource mobilization is also critical. We need all this from all. So we look forward to seeing you in Addis Ababa, maybe not 2017, but 2018, you know. I thank you. Grazie mille.
Grazie veramente tanto. Thank you ever so much, Your Excellency. It was a pleasure to have you here. Well, It's been interesting now to have the point of view from young entrepreneurs in Africa, so I would like to call up immediately to the stage Ms. Lilian Motongori from Kenya. One of our two speakers on this subject matter. Ms. Motongori, thank you very much indeed. And for you, thank you.
Okay. It's an honor being here and actually speaking after the minister, the Ethiopian minister. I know many of you are so tired, so I'll be very, very brief. Okay. So I want to speak of my personal experience with working in innovation and the different projects I'm in. So that's me here. There's an I on my name there, Mutongori. Okay, sorry. Yeah, so I'll start with them. So Angaza Dada Initiative, I'm the founder and the director for Angaza Dada. I will talk about it later. Then there is Youth Senate Kenya. I'm the youth senator for Nakuru County. Then there is Sustainable Off-Grid Solutions for African Economic Development Program. I'm the Kenya contact person and an advocate for it too. I will also talk about it. Youth Senate Kenya is about leadership. So we talk about opportunities for the youth in Nakuru County. Nakuru is a county within Kenya. Then there is Wahandisi La Femme. I'm the program director. Wahandisi La Femme is more about women engineers. There is the Association of Engineering Students. I was the former vice chairperson, then I was the chairperson. Then there is Kenya Model, United Nations. I'm the undersecretary, I was the undersecretary general till yesterday within the University of Eldoret. The Global Alliance of Youth Against Violence Extremism. Right now we're almost nearing to the elections, and we know there is so much extremism, violence extremism within the country. You've heard of Al-Shabaab, so we do research on that. And then the African Youth Leadership Forum, I'm the coordinator in Eldoret, it's within Kenya. And finally, I just cleared from Mechanical and Production Engineering Studies at the University of Eldoret. So there is Angaza Dada, the suicide program, the University of Eldoret, Kenya Model United Nations, Association of Engineering Students, Youth Senate Kenya, and Global Alliance of Youths Against Violent Extremism, and finally, Wahandisi La Femme. So I'm going to talk about how to make innovation in Africa with a special focus on women and entrepreneurship. We see a photo there of a woman in Africa. If wealth was an inevitable result of hard work and enterprise, every woman in Africa will be a millionaire. What I mean to say is this, that Africa, the women in Africa, in as much as we may not be very wealthy, but it doesn't mean that we are not working hard to provide for our families. And most of the parts in Africa, the women are the ones providing the food for the family. And also in other parts in Africa, some of the women in the rural areas, they do the building and stuff. I just wonder why they're not into engineering. So on the ways of promoting innovation, first, there's the business management education and mentorship offered to young women. I believe that if we want to make Africa, to improve innovation in Africa, we should focus on the young people. We should focus on education, and we should teach people on managing businesses and show them business opportunity. We should also mentor young women to get into the business area. Then on-the-job training and mentoring, that's many women will get into the job market and they forget about entrepreneurship. But if we're able to mentor them on entrepreneurship, that's also a great way of promoting innovation. Then access to networking opportunities for women. This is a great opportunity even for me being here. I believe if there are other women who had these opportunities, we could be able to network them to the opportunities that are available for them. Then there's access to capital and technical expertise. There's so many, as I said before in one of the interviews, there's so many innovations ideas in Africa, but there's lack of capital. So if we can be able to access them or connect them to capital and technical expertise, we'll be able to go far. We should also support innovative ideas. We should invest in young women economic empowerment and education. We should also support ideation challenges for women and young girls, where we do this actually with Angaza Dada Initiative and Wahandisi La Femme, where we go to schools and very young girls, we bring a challenge, different challenges over a short period of time, and we ask them to bring an innovative solutions. And we hear a lot of solutions from very young girls. And one of the speakers here was telling me about an award that they're giving to young energy inventors in Kenya and in Africa. And I believe there are so many solutions, innovative solutions in Kenya. If we're able to have these ideation challenges and support them, we will be able to see the kind of potential that is in Africa. Then we should also encourage women's educational choices into science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, STEM. As you see here, even in this forum, most of the people here, the guys who are speaking on engineering were men, but there are women too, and it happens a lot. Here, there are so many women in this area, but in Africa, engineering has very few women. I don't know if it's the same here. But like in my class, we were only 2 ladies, but we want to bring more women into the field of engineering. So we should encourage their choices from at very young age in school, primary school and secondary school, and get them to have innovative ideas. If you want to help Africa, don't just give us, they say, there's a proverb that says that you shouldn't just give them fish, but teach them how to fish. And education teaches them how to fish. So we should train women in becoming entrepreneurs in STEM. There was a research that was done where 30% of the women who get into the STEM fields, and there are very few, the women who get into the STEM fields, only 30% are doing engineering work. Most of them will get into STEM fields, and when they go to the job market, they're doing totally different things. So we should train women who are also in the STEM field to practice what they've studied for. Then we should also do gender monitoring of available support for business incubators, that is, support startups that are coming up. And also, since I'm focusing on women, we should also give consideration to the women startups that are coming up. So there's Angaza Dada Initiative. That's my initiative. It's a non-profit initiative. So we focus on STEM, empowerment, ideation challenges, as I said, mentorship, where we go to schools, entrepreneurship workshops, where we train people in the rural areas, the women in the rural areas. We go to them and train them on the need to get into entrepreneurship, to provide for themselves, better ways of providing for themselves, where we teach them, we link them up with banks and also teach them on savings. And then we do gender parity advocacy. I'm sorry, I had very few slides. I would have shown you the work that we've done. We do gender parity advocacy in areas where the women are not well represented. We do campaign, actually organize annually, once in a year. We do a gender parity advocacy. We bring the university on board and any other organizations that want to partner with us to advocate on that level. We also do anti-FGM and anti-rape advocacy. This is totally different from what we're talking about here. But I come from a community where female genital mutilation is taking place. And most of these people believe that once you've gone through, it's more like male circumcision, but for women. Once you've gone through that, you become a real woman. And they stop school, but it's a very, very small community. So we train them we train the women and the community also, talk to older men and women on the effects of FGM and encourage the young ladies not to go through the process and to go in with their education. And also anti-rape advocacy. We also have a technical school that is underway. We've already gotten a facility, but we lack the the instruments or the capital to get all the instruments for the technical school that we're coming up with, but we've already built it already. So that is the Angaza Dada initiative. And then, as you see, this is a picture of women in the rural areas. That is very long time ago. They were used in building. So I believe we should have more women engineers. If they, long time ago, they used to build, they should still be there. Not men, men never used to do this. It was a woman's job. So women can be engineers. This is also another program I have. Apart from education, there's a program that I'm working on, the Sustainable Off-Grid Solutions for African Economic Development Program, or the SUSAID program, where it's located in Turkana region. The Turkana region of Kenya recently just has the government is focusing on this region because there was recent oil discovery, and but the people in the area are living in very poor conditions and they lack energy. So we are focusing on a business model where we'll be able to offer grid energy solution. We have a research institute. I don't know if some of you have heard of Richard Leakey. We're working with him, where he has Turkana Basin Institute that offers the labs for the research. And then we also want to offer water solutions. We are open for partnerships at the moment as we are laying the groundwork and for mobilization of resources. And something else I also wanted to talk about in this program, our plan is to generate, store, and commercially distribute electricity in a number of off-grid towns within Turkana County based on solar hybrid and mini-grid technology with participation of local Kenyan companies, and also that's any company that would want to partner with us. We've done some feasibility studies on the solar hybrid mini-grid installations in some of the towns in Turkana, and we are now using that to plan the pilot project on solar hybrid mini-grid systems. And we, through our studies and planning, we've seen that we'll be able to install to as many up to 6,000 and 7,000 off-grid connections in Turkana County. Right now, we're partnering with Stony Brook University in the US, and we're also partnering with the famous archaeologist, Richard Leakey. So, and if any other company will be interested in partnering with us, we're open for that. And yeah, that's basically on sustainable off-grid solutions. And these are my contacts, my email address, just in case you'll want to contact me after this. That's my email address, my mobile number. I'm on Skype and Twitter and Facebook. And my interests are in mechanical engineering, renewable energy, women empowerment, leadership, entrepreneurship, and education. I hope it wasn't very long, but thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Not only was it long, it was very precise, concise, and to the point.
Thank you.
Grateful to and very happy to have you here. And always from the point of view of young entrepreneurship in Africa. This time, I'm pleased to call Mr. Samuel Malinga, Managing Director at Sanitation Africa Limited. Mr. Malinga. Welcome here to Enel. And thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're most welcome to this conference. My name is Samuel Malinga. I'm the Managing Director of Sanitation Africa and the United Nations Young Leader for the Sustainable Development Goals. Innovation to power Africa. Before I go further, I would like to ask you a simple question. To what extent do we involve the youth in innovations to power Africa? Also, I would like to ask a similar question. How are we preparing, how are we building the capacity of the youth to manage the power systems? So, Africa is endowed with significant amounts of solar and wind energy, receiving about 220 kilocalories per square centimeter. This is very huge. So these resources are not tapped. And also we notice that we receive long daylight, over 12 hours sometimes, with temperatures reaching around 35 degrees. It's also reported that over 620 million people in Africa lack access to energy. And this is about 2/3 of the African population. It's a big problem, but it's an opportunity to entrepreneurs to tap into this crisis. Africa contributes about 15% of the world's population and remains world poor. But also, there's the smallest GDP, about 2.4%. So some of the barriers to renewable energy investment in Africa have been highlighted, but I just want to hit on a few. There are poorly maintained power grids, leading to huge transmission losses. I like the gentleman who mentioned about how do we transmit power safely. We should think of means that reduce power loss. Most of the transmission lines and distribution lines do not have the capacity to handle intermittent solar and wind power. As we are speaking now, there's a challenge of the project lead time. Most projects take around 5 to 10 years, and this is very dangerous. It delays on the impact. People take long to achieve other things if we delay to give them the right power, the right energy they need. So I think these projects should take a shortest time, 1 to 3 years, or we should work very hard to make sure that Africa gets energy, because we are delaying a lot. There's a lot they need to do with power. The government policies are not suitable for renewable energy. There's less investment in research. There's less investment in also technology uptake. And also, there are high tariffs of loans. Let's take a look at the institutional structure of the power sector in Africa. It's mainly the Ministry of Finance gives money to the Ministry of Energy after approval from the Parliament. But normally, the Parliament decides which areas they need for power expansion mainly. So the investors come, they come to the Ministry of Energy, who permits them to do power generation or distribution. Also, under the Electricity Regulatory Agency, there are power generators for power generation, distribution, transmission. So the challenge is, where should we lie mainly? I think we need people in this conference to concentrate on power generation and distribution. There are very many big challenges which I feel we can tap into. The Ethiopian minister mentioned core areas that use energy. That's agriculture, and it's similar not only in Ethiopia. It's more or less like the previous slide. So in Africa currently, most communities use around 1 to 10 kilowatt peak for just lighting. But I want us to think about how do we make, it's not all about reading, it's not all about light. How do we make them use, for example, 10 kilowatt to 500 kilowatts in solar energy or something like that? We need to make sure that power will facilitate very many businesses in agriculture, in preservation. Let's not talk about light only. You cannot go to school when you don't have money. There was a very good presenter from INEL, head of microgrid. We should encourage such projects. that provide power for production. We need power for generating and facilitate businesses. Those are some of the applications of renewable energy in Africa. Wind power, it has been talked. It's not very good. It has low speed in a sub-Saharan region. But of course, in North Africa and South Africa, there are high wind speeds, which encourage wind energy generation. Those are some of the projects, windmills we constructed in northeastern Uganda. Yes, I'm going to talk about sanitation. I was hesitant to talk about sanitation, but Angelo encouraged me to talk about it. In Africa, less than 10% of the population, most towns, are connected to the sewer line. So they use on-site sanitation facilities like septics and toilets, which require emptying. So we are encouraging the use of decentralized fecal sludge treatment system for treating the human waste. We have already developed the emptying pumps for pumping the waste from the pits. We have developed the innovative toilets for high water table, for weak soils, and also for rocky soil formations. So we need to encourage the treatment of waste. What next after treatment of waste? We can do so many things with the waste, but this is a typical example. We convert raw sludge into briquettes or charcoal. Mr. Roberto talked about the challenge in Kenya. We can save so many trees. We can save a lot if we get an alternative source to firewood and charcoal from trees. So we convert the sludge into briquettes. It is very safe. One advantage, it's carbonized at 350 degrees centigrade. So no microbacteria can surface in such temperatures. It burns longer, it is safe, and also 40% cheaper than charcoal. So we should embrace some of this. A lot has been talked about. Some of the technologies we develop, some of the users, they are in rural areas. So what we do mainly, we work with the district to identify useful and hardworking entrepreneurs to act as our distributors. We give them the technical skills, how to make our products, how to service them, and also try to create businesses within our products. It's very important to empower the ordinary people by first teaching them how to do some of the things, how to service them, and putting a business mind into those people. So I've done so many trainings. Mainly they need trainings in bookkeeping, also in managing their businesses. Some of them do not, they get money and use it, so they need to know how to manage their finances, how to monitor their growth. And of course, they help us to reach, it will create more impact, employment, impact to the environment. It's better felt if you are ready to create distribution channels down there in the villages. In conclusion, many people have already seen that Africa still presents a huge potential for renewable energy investment. And there is abundant renewable energy resources in Africa. I would like to thank the RES4MED for inviting me to speak tonight. It is very good to talk about innovation. It's very good to talk about the youth in innovations. Thank you so much.
Okay. And it was great to have you here to listen about your very innovative ideas.
Thank you.
And remaining actually on, please, sir, thank you very much. You can, and remaining on the subject matter of innovation, very interestingly, we're going to be talking about fiber optics right now with Mr. Jeremiah Kiplagat of Kenya Power International. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I once again want to thank RES4Africa for become a common visitor in Rome. This time, I'm coming alone. Last time I was wearing some shoes, but this time I'm alone, and I want to talk about one of the things that I'm doing in Kenya Power, managing a fiber business. I will summarize this slide by saying in the year 2015, in the Beijing Olympics, a young man won gold medal by throwing javelin. And he didn't have a coach, but he learned on YouTube. So YouTube was his coach. He was seeing on YouTube and practicing, and he was able to win gold in the 2 years ago. I also watched news in Kenya some time back. A farmer in Nakuru learned how to farm what we call pineapples and mushrooms, and he didn't have a coach. He learned on YouTube. Many other things. You have heard a lot about mobile money transfer in Kenya, and this is happening because of the internet and communication. So this is an important, it's actually becoming a utility necessity. Internet is a necessity. So in just some statistics, ITU statistics, in terms of broadband penetration in Africa is the lowest, about 19%. This is statistics of around 2015. Also, the mobile penetration is the highest, is growing very fast in the world. So there is need to develop infrastructure to grow the broadband, and this can provide a lot of opportunities for young guys to innovate. Largely, a lot has been done. The undersea connectivity has been done. We have several providers connecting Africa to the rest of the world, to the Europe and Middle East. Right now, the focus is on upgrading the mobile networks to support smartphones, 3G, 4G, and fiber broadband now to connect homes. And this is a key because now fast speeds are very important. This shows the speed taken, some statistics, but fiber is the technology of the future. Going forward, it can support up to high speeds, 1G, GB. Already Google Fiber in the US offers very high speeds, up to 1 gigabyte per second, both up and down downloads. So we are saying if you compare copper and wireless to broadband, it's like two different, getting water from a tap and from a wide river. It's limitless. So there is what we are doing now in providing electricity. We are also trying to provide fiber or telecommunication through fiber. And by a small margin, if you are connecting homes on electricity overhead cables, you can add small margin 10 to 15% and provide fiber as well. So that's what we are doing in Kenya. Of course, this has to be, there are standards which must meet to make sure that the two can coexist together, and which are easy for electrical engineers, they fully understand. And this can provide opportunity to generate revenues, additional revenues. Merits for fiber is well known, high speeds, easy to install on fiber overheads. Unlike digging, mostly digging, at the same time in Africa we are also developing infrastructure, roads, buildings, and the underground fiber will keep being disconnected. So overhead has proven to be the most reliable and the cheap, very cheap, about 1/3 the cost of underground cables. In Kenya Power, we started this business. Initially, there was fiber on overhead used for internal communication to manage the power line, but there was excess capacity. So we started by leasing this to telecom companies, what we call dark fiber, where the telcos light them and flow the traffic. We have increased that, and the revenues are growing as well. We have network all over the country, and we hope now to grow and extend to fiber to homes using the same infrastructure. There are two technologies, what we call OBGW. The earth wire inside has fiber. For electrical engineers, they know, which is used for earthing, and that is where they are very safe on top of the power line. And we also, ADSS is the one which is hung just below the power line, or it can be above the power line. So the opportunities are enormous to provide fiber to homes. Okay, that's for Kenya. They plan to digitize, provide a digital economy in Kenya that can be realized by providing cheap broadband, among other things. Internet is becoming a basic necessity, as you all know. So they are, I've said they are cheap. The reliability is high. You don't need extra way lifts. Cost of installation is low. And just to finish, there is opportunity to provide digital connectivity using power lines, and this can support. Of course, ICT requires power, and if you can provide both, the better, to transform Africa in the most cost-effective manner. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kaga. Thank you very much indeed. It's a pleasure to welcome you for the second time indeed to Rome, and we hope it's only the beginning of a very long and fruitful relationship. Well,
Thank you.
our last speaker for the evening is Professor Da Silva, DVC Strathmore University. Professor, welcome. Thank you very much.
So, ladies and gentlemen, very sorry I'm the one between you and the road. So I'll try to be as crisp as possible. So I'm a Brazilian by birth, but I am an African by choice, because about 20 years ago I decided to move to Africa. So I was in Uganda for 13 years and 7 years in Kenya. Now in Kenya, my home is called Strathmore University. It is a very unique university because it's the only that I know. Perhaps you will educate me, but that I know is the only university in the whole planet which is a zero carbon footprint. Because what happens is that we have a 600 kilowatt solar system on top of the roof, and we use about 350, that's our peak consumption, and then with the balance, we sell to Kiplagat. He is Kenya Power, so I sell to him, and it's very sweet. Yeah, so, and what we also do is actually to use that solar system as a live laboratory to teach engineers from Kenya Power and from the industry how to handle grid tie, utility size solar systems, and also hybrid. Now, one of the things that when Roberto Vigotti proposed to have us as partner for the RES for Africa, we thought we could actually offer him a nice opportunity because of the Strathmore experience. Strathmore University, we really try to, one of the pillars for us is research, because we do think that unless somebody goes into the levels of masters and PhD, we can't get the real development. So the commitment with us is that we shall work together so that we get very young and brilliant African students to come to Polytechnic of Milan, Polytechnic of Torino, Bocconi University to get trained and go back and electrify Africa. All right, so we really hope that there will be a huge impact in society, because we do believe that education is the only thing that can make for development. And then I am a Brazilian by birth, as I told you, and in the 70s, Brazil was a developing country. And so they decided to have a project called the Educação Sem Fronteira, Education Without Borders. They sent some Brazilians out there to study three things. One was aeronautic aviation, the other was agribusiness, and the other was petroleum exploration. So now, some 40 years down the line, I think now Brazil is the 8th economy in the planet. We are almost getting to knock off England there as the 7th economy. And because Brazil is arguably the best country in the planet in agribusiness. Also, we sell jets to many countries, including KLM and the American Airlines, the Embraer, and made in Brazil. And also Petrobras does petroleum exploration, subwater and sub-ice. And you see, this is what we hope to, Roberto Vigotti, RES4Africa will help us, sending Kenyans and also Ethiopians and Ugandans to places where they can learn things. They go back, they do business, because actually theory doesn't solve problems. What solves problems is implementation. So when Vigotti launched the RES4Africa last year, he carried with him some 50 companies from here, from Italy, who did B2B meetings there, because sustainability is a very beautiful name for making money. So the more money you make, the more sustainable you are. Yeah, so because people will be ready to buy your products and develop. So that is the thing. One thing that happens to Africa is that we are demographically correct. The average age of Kenya is 19 years, and the average age of Uganda is 16 years, meaning it is a very young country with a lot of people ready to be educated, okay? As you know, the average age of Italy, I don't know, 45 perhaps, and Vigotti is making it even worse, and the one of Germany is 47. So, and then also they have kind of, they are optimistic. They want the women, they want to have children, they have 5, 6 children, and they are so happy. So they are optimistic, and then this also helps for development, yeah? So those who come here and learn things, they are committed to go in there and developing it. So in Strathmore, we try to preserve it. We help them to have this all-round education in a spirit of freedom and responsibility. So we teach them about ethics, yeah? And it's quite interesting. You should come once and visit us. This is one of the photos of our solar system. We also have solar water heating. This is our building are LEED certified. So we have natural lighting, we have solar water heating, we have solar photovoltaic. This is 120,000 watts on top of our building there. Yeah, as you can see, we have 6 places in our building. Still there is room for more. I was to ask Venturini to give me some 400 kilowatt more of panels. Let's see how it will go. And we also teach people how to do business. Now, one of the things that Lillian was saying is about women. We are very happy to tell you that these 2 are girls. We train women in entrepreneurship and renewable energy. So we got some money from USAID, so they are there. They did, we trained some 70 ladies. And you guess what? Ladies are better than men down there, aren't they? So they don't drink, they don't watch too much football in television, they pay their bills, they are so responsible. So we are training them with the money of USAID, and then it is practical. You know, they climb the roof, they put the thing there, we tell them to come with the boots and the trousers, and that is, and they formed something called WISE. That is Women in Sustainable Energy and entrepreneurship. So perhaps you should get to know them, because I can see you are a wise person as well. No? Yeah, so these are the champions. of the thing. And then obviously we want to get ladies coming here under RES4Africa, being trained at master's level, PhD levels, you know, engineer like Lilian, and then they can go back and make that country a better one. So the focus is on renewable energy, source of energy, and how to integrate it into the national grid. Vigotti has commissioned the team to do a study on how to integrate renewable energy into the national grid. And then Dr. Kip Lagat has offered a very nice place for the Mini Grid Academy. So it is there for training people. And we will want to foster rural electrification because obviously this is what will make the country to develop. I see Kenya, I see that region as a sleeping giant. The moment you give them power, they begin doing welding, gray milling, even hairdressing, and etc. So they make money. So using the mini grid as a tool to achieve electrification is also the important thing. And then all these things were achieved in less than 1 year. You see, so I really am very optimistic. I'm very proud of being a partner with RES4Africa, and I do think that we have a lot to develop. So in our university, we have a center for research in energy called CERC. We have trained more than 1,000 technicians all over the country because normally the trained ones stay in Nairobi, so we have trained them in 25 other areas. And then the ladies, and then engineers also trained in hybrid. There are places in the map that Lilian showed that can't be reached by the grid. So there you have generators. So what they are doing is to put panels to make it a hybrid, and then they train people on fuel saver, which is a technology that we also teach in that center of ours, yes? So I think this is always just the beginning, because we hope that in some 2 or 3 years we'll have a lot of things to show you as a result of RES4Africa. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Silva. Well,
Most welcome.
thank you very much indeed. Congratulations. We began the day in a note of optimism. We're ending the day in a note of optimism. There was one name that kept cropping up again and again and again, the name of Roberto Vigotti, Bob to his friends.
Focus on this one, please. Can you focus on this one? On this new button I put on? Because you see what it is?
Ladies and gentlemen,
I will,
closing remarks to Roberto Vigotti.
Very closing. I will spare you half an hour discount because you have been good, not very many anymore, but I think we had a great day. I'm really impressed by most of the presentation, really impressed. And I think I want to thank just, well, tomorrow, you know, the day we are going to put on the website of both RES4MED, RES4Africa, all the presentation, and particularly with the YouTube, it will be also recorded. So I think you will get full access of our events. This is the 5th year. We heard a lot about the future 5 years. Even though I'm not as old as I look, it just shows my button. I'm 71 actually. I'm not really joking, but I think the passion I show for my staff is the same passion I really live. No conclusion. The conclusion were very by themselves. The conclusion was these talks. The conclusion was the smile of our young African here. The conclusion is that we have a program to go. The conclusion that really, once again, thanks to my member, thanks to Enel Green Power, thanks to the host here, and again, I have to mention Alessia Corsi, who is there. Without her, nothing happened here. And of course, my staff is done. I thank Cinzia, the coordinator, who must be somewhere in this cloud, but thank you, Cinzia. Once again, a very professional job. And again, I'm really impressed, and I'm really, I go back with a lot more, let's say, motivation for going forward. I don't promise 5 more years, but I promise I will be working for that. So with that one, I close the 5th edition of the annual conference, and the next events are 2nd and 3rd October in Addis Abeba, 28, 9 something November in Nairobi. And of course, you will be automatically put in our list of a newsletter. If you don't want to cut it, but anyhow, you'll be informed what's going on. Thank you so much. For those who came so far from away, thank you for coming all the way to Roma. I think now is the best weather to be as a tourist if you can. Thank you, arrivederci, e ciao. Thank you, Igor.
Choosing your battles, pick yourself up and dust yourself